very scary.
It is. So for any of you who feel a sort of loss of energy, there's some chocolates on the counter. And we now have a mystery going, which was there were twice as many chocolates when I left the store Saturday. Who is the culprit?
It was a middle-aged woman who ate them all.
That was it?
That would be my guess.
All right. Great.
Our lack of estrogen makes us have to eat more chocolate.
Well,
Right? It's an inverse relationship. See, look at all you're learning right off the bat.
this is from a woman whose character, Mary D'Annunzio, is unbelievably pregnant throughout this book here. And at one point, Lisa comments that Mary has a human being sitting on her bladder. Those of you who've been pregnant will sympathize with that. Those of you who haven't been will probably still try to envision it. But there we are.
You guys know me. I can always be relied upon for the cheap joke. And that's my job, a little comic relief in these books.
I see. You know what? Isn't this clever? I actually got flowers that match you.
Wow.
I know. Look at that. All right, we'll move to that. So this is Rosado and D'Annunzio number 6. But how many Rosados were there before you decided to bring Mary up to like full partner?
I know. I don't even know the answer to that question. First of all, hi everybody, and thank you for being here. It's really, really lovely to see you. I think there might have been 15 or so.
Everywhere that Mary went?
Yeah, something like starting with that. When none of you were born yet. There were dinosaurs roaming the earth. Horses, the dinosaurs were driving the horses and buggies, as I remember. But, and I didn't really intend, that you will not be surprised to know, as a series,
Right.
because that would require planning, and look at my hair. This is me debuting my, well, I don't want to say natural, because it's still a completely fictional color, but this is like me being curly.
Is it the
me.
winter?
This is real. Yeah. Well, it's easier. I'm journeying towards self-acceptance. That's what I just.
Which some
What
people.
can I do? This is what it does. After blowing it dry for like 50 years, it still wants to curl. I'm like, you know what? You win. You win, girl. I'm sorry, you didn't ask me about my
No,
hair.
but I'm delighted to hear that this is a natural look for you. Because some people would have paid a fortune to achieve it, right?
Thanks, Barbara.
Right, you know, it's absolutely true. I would love it if my hair could, but, you know.
Come on, are these straight?
Mine is really straight. Right. When I was a little girl, I had pigtails, and my hair is so fine and so slippery that the rubber bands would slide right off.
Yes.
My mother would just go like, so we all have different. It's your Italian ancestry.
That
Right?
must be what it is. And my relatives are here today, so yeah.
Oh, wonderful! How exciting!
But I didn't intend it as a series, and then I just sort of, as
Kept
you know,
writing.
I kept writing, and I got separation anxiety. Like I missed them. So then I said, well, just put them all in the old law firm. Then it became an all-female law firm, and then Mary, who knew, made partner, and then I got to reboot it, and then we come to Feared, which is all this time I said to myself, sooner or later, somebody's going to sue them for reverse sex discrimination. And that's what happens in this book.
It is, and it's really a clever plot. You think you're being lulled by the pregnancy and other things, and you think nothing bad's going to happen, and you're so wrong. You are just
Bad
so
things are going to
wrong.
happen. Oh, wait, did you know, by the way, can I just say,
Of course.
that People magazine came out? Yeah. I thought I had it. Because that's how lame I am, that I actually will bring it, and I forgot it.
Okay.
I wonder if I did. Hold on a minute. I thought it. Well, anyway, it made a pick of People magazine this week, and they called it a propulsive summer thriller. I had to look it up, but it's good. It's good.
Not
I really think of myself as propulsive. I'm caffeinated, but I'm not
No,
propulsive.
I think they were referring to the plot, not you personally.
Oh, she's so smart. We didn't even get to say thanks to you. Could we just have a round of applause for Barbara? You know I love coming here, and I love to tell you how awesome you are to support this amazing store. It is one of the best independents in the whole frigging country.
Amen.
Frigging is a literary term about which you may be familiar. I just think it's so awesome that you're here to support it, and Barbara, thank you for always being there for us. I mean, you just always, and your community. It's true.
Well, it's very kind of you to say that. I will point out in turn that Lisa is actually a serious book buyer for the Poison Pen.
That's right. I know.
Right.
I like those signed copies.
That's
baby.
right.
Signed. I am such a geek, and in my house, so of course I have way too many books. And then I have the signed ones, and I made a little thing. I sent away. You could get a little template that says signed. I feel so smart when I walk by my signed books. I go, that's right, and nobody's allowed to borrow them.
That's a really smart idea. Plus, there's an app you can get on your phone where you can actually catalog them. I keep thinking I will do that, but I haven't gotten around to it. Yeah. You didn't know that either. Good, I feel better. I'm always the last geek in the room, you know, so, yeah.
I mean, I have them in alphabetical order. Meanwhile, how dumb is it that these people who do it by color? Is that mean to say? I see this magazine. Does anyone here do by color? Yeah, they're completely embarrassed.
I did try it.
But what is
You can't find them.
You can't find
But
them.
it looks really cool.
I
Like,
bet.
A month or two.
You can actually hire a company that will paint.
Yeah, I would flip them out.
Yeah, no, you can hire a company that will actually paint a whole scrim that you can then put over your bookcases so they will look fabulous and, you know, heights and colors and then you can look behind it and find your actual, like, two-way Library of Congress cataloging numbers and find your notes.
They
Right.
could give you like a cardboard cutout of your husband, and you can put him right in front of your husband.
If you have one.
If you haven't, if you didn't, all the better. You can get the cardboard cut. You know I have a cardboard cutout in my house of Bradley Cooper. He's miniature though. He's not. He's only from here to here, but we watched the football games together because you know we won the Super Bowl. Please, yeah, you know, please. Isn't it our time? Every century, just once a century.
You're talking to a Cubs fan, come on.
All right.
Right, so there we
Love and
are.
loyalty, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, you were saying something important, no doubt.
Well, I was keep trying to move back towards the book, but I'm really not going. What we should say to you is that Lisa is going to be doing some different things. So this is a really interesting book, and I think you're going to kind of put these people to rest for a little bit, right?
Well, not too long.
Not too long.
No, I mean, this was, I really, you try to do something different each time. And when I thought about this series, I always wanted to sort of say, like, this is embarrassing to say, but I'm trying to figure out the difference between men and women. This will tell you why I'm divorced twice, because I don't actually know. You could say, pull the pants down, you'll find out. But I just wanted to sort of are we different? How are we different? Do we run business different? Do we have different views of justice? This book is kind of, to me, I was waiting to do this in this series. I was like, you have to do this. And it seemed like, and also there's this nemesis who's named Nick Machiavelli. And he does, I made
You
it
didn't
up.
borrow that, yeah, right? You made it up,
No,
right?
it's only because those of you from Philly will know that, well, there's 37 people in the Philadelphia area who last name is Machiavelli.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that isn't completely foreseeable that one of them would pretend to be related somehow, because believe me, I'm a lawyer, like these lawyers, you know what I mean? They're gonna do that. And I also like the whole idea too that in a more lighthearted way, or a more subtle way, so to say, which subtlety is not my strong suit, but that you play with this notion of justice, you know, because Mary has a notion of justice, and Benny has a notion of justice, and then there's Nick Machiavelli. I should get two, because what I'm saying is so important for that.
It may be that the battery died.
You don't want to
is
miss
that what
any
happened?
of this. So all you've missed so far is that I'm not a natural blonde, but you knew that. But then you have this third type of justice, which is Nick Machiavelli. And as you know, the prince, he believed, well, the question that he posed is it better to be loved or feared? Machiavelli, the real Machiavelli, thought it was better to be feared. And I thought, I didn't plan this either, but Mary D'Annunzio is the perfect example of somebody who thinks it's better to be loved. I kind of think that too. And as a personal matter, am I going, all right, well, I'll just say it, which is that when you go, what motivated this book, it's that for me, in writing all this time, and in my relationship to the characters, and my relationship to you guys, and to Barbara, to the publisher, I think business is personal. You know, like if you go back to The Godfather, they're always like, it's just business, you know. And that's the little model you're taught. I think you're taught that. As a lawyer, I was like, this is business. It's not personal. But I never approached the cases that way. I felt like the cases were personal. I felt that I wanted to fight for whoever my client was. And the same with my personal life with business. I have our relationship is personal.
Almost 30 years old, actually.
Exactly, Barbara, as I always love to say, was the first person who, you called me up, read the advance copy, was like, you know, kid, you got talent, kid, basically. And I was like, I wept. And now, is that gonna be a business relationship? Of course not. And so a little bit I thought to myself, to a certain extent, I wonder if maybe that's a gender difference. Men think it's business, women think it's personal. I don't know, but I wanted to explore it. And the perfect way to explore it is Mary D'Annunzio versus Nick Machiavelli. And they're gonna figure out in this book, when they come head to head, is it better to be loved or better to be feared? And can you be successful if you're just loved?
That's an excellent question.
Well, that's what was going on in my little brain and why I wrote it.
Interestingly enough, and I often wonder whether academics just have too much time on their hands, but there was a study written up in the journal, I don't know if you saw it, but I knew I'd be seeing you so I could tell you about it, where they did a study to see that if people were called by their whole name, as let's say Lisa Scottoline, as opposed to Scottoline, which would have the most weight. And it turns out, in their study anyway, that people who are referred to only by their last name are considered to be more important and more pivotal and more powerful than people who are called by their whole name. And I'll digress a moment and say that one of the absolute badges of being important in the tech world is if your email address is jeff@amazon.com. It's not jeff.bezos@amazon.com.
Right.
If you can be, and there are actual contracts for people hiring into some of these firms where they will get to be like Ralph, you know, at Tesla.com or something.
Right.
Anyway, and it turned out in this study that women were almost always called by both names, and men were almost always called only by their last name, and that they applied then to things like status in the company and pay. And it turned out there was a great correlation. You know, it's one of these weird sort of gender things, but I never really thought about that. When I write reviews for you in the e-news and everything, I just call all the authors by their last name. Because, you know, I don't say Lisa, partly it's just save space, right, in typing. But I want everybody to sound the same. So obviously I must have thought about that in some, you know, way or other and thought, okay, I'll refer to everyone exactly the same and then it won't sound like I'm, you know, Lisa Scottoline is writing something that's not nearly as important as Winslow, for example.
Right. No, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's kind of, and that's what's so cool about a group like this, which is that although I think we're awesome, and we're also great looking, but we are open-minded enough to look at these issues, because as you know, I've said this before, I'm not writing for a set of reproductive organs. I don't think I only want women to read me, or I want everyone to read me. But I think enlightened men, like the ones here, because believe me, there's plenty of men who won't pick up a book by a woman. As I've told this story, but permit me, where I was in, you know, when you're on book tour, you're in an airport bookstore watching someone. I watched a guy pick up my book, picked it up. He's looking at it. This was a couple years ago, not now. Looks at it, looks at the back, reading the beginning, reading the flap copy. You know the stuff that says how great I am. I write that. And also the author photo is completely fictional, as you know. So I watch him look at this book the whole time and think, I wonder if he's going to buy it. And he puts it down, and he puts it back. I'm like, oh! So I basically get the book, buy the book, and give it to the man. Yes, because no one gets out alive. I said, sir, I'm your author. I look nothing like this virgin, but I'd love you to have this book. I wonder, though, oh, thank you, he says. I said, I have to ask you, though, I wonder why you didn't buy it. And he said, well, I never buy books by women. And I said, well, me, no, I said, you still haven't. He's got a little South Philly on his honey. No. Took it on the chin. I said, but do me a favor, give me a shot. Take it home and read it. And he wrote me back 3 days later an email and he said, I really loved your book. You write like a man. But I love that. I'm interested in that. And, you know, like this book's a good, like you say, she married an and is pregnant. Now, I have been pregnant. And I was like, I was a lawyer at the time. And I said to myself, how many thrillers do you read where the main character is really pregnant? I can think of Fargo. And I remember in Fargo, it made a really good, I was like, that is so relatable. Like, right, you're nodding, like, oh my God. And I wanted that. Now, it's the same thing happened when I started writing these books, you know, and she's got the wonderful Italian family, and I thought, I never read that in a thriller either. And I know it sounds completely self-serving. Usually I'm only 98% self-serving, but I just went over the top of it. But that, if it was never in a thriller before, that's okay. Because you think it's true and you lived it. So Mary's pregnancy is, and what she feels about that and how she's going to live her life and her husband and her life, you know, that's the wonderful thing I think about books nowadays. We have a depth of characterization. Not only, you know, as there's more diversity and as time goes on, I think readers demand it. Readers are used to seeing, like, think of something like Breaking Bad, right? That's a fully realized character. With a professional life and a personal life, and you know that sort of goes off the rails. But it's fun to think about these interests, these notions of gender and stuff, and that's what I wanted to play with in this book.
So while you're dreaming up this Machiavellian plot,
Right.
which it really is, and caught me by surprise, so we won't tell you about it so we don't ruin your surprise. It makes Mary more vulnerable to have her lawsuit or firm sued, you know. I mean, they could be facing ruin. And there's a man who works, that doesn't give anything away because it comes right up at the beginning. A guy that works in their firm, whom they discovered to their surprise, actually does feel some sense of discrimination, or he'll never make partner, or whatever it might be. But if Mary were not so pregnant and so hormonal and all, she might have reacted very differently to this terrible situation.
That's true too.
Which may take down the entire firm. Now, Benny, of course, has a very different reaction, being Benny, right?
Right. Benny has never had estrogen. But I'd like to, because also when this male associate, you know, and we're not giving anything away, but when I wanted to play with that too, because one of the things I like to think about, I know you guys get these issues when I raise them as subtly as I can, is what are the limits of the law? Like he says, well, I'm not saying that I feel that you would discriminate against me as a man, but I don't feel super comfortable here. You're all women. That's all you freaking talk about. And now she's pregnant, and we gotta hear all this stuff. And maybe, is that discriminatory? Well, let me tell you, you can flip that if you're a woman, and you're, sorry. That's all right.
I beg your pardon, I was there for a picture.
Oh well, it doesn't matter. You know, you flip it if you're a woman. There's such a thing as a hostile workplace. Let's say you're a woman and everybody in the room is a man, and they make jokes, and the jokes are a little sexual or a little crude. You feel a little uncomfortable. All this stuff with Me Too raises stuff that I think is really interesting and borderline about what are the limits of the law. I like to look at what.
Sorry, I turned it off.
You have a life. I, however,
No.
don't.
I did turn it off. Try it again. All right.
So that's the kind of stuff that the book's dealing with too. And Benny and Mary have their difference of opinions. What I love is I have great girlfriends, and we're friends, and you guys have great girlfriends. It's weird when you don't agree with your friend. I mean, I don't even know what I would do if that happened. I think I was wrong. If my best friend didn't think I was doing the right thing, I would be changed. But here's Mary and Benny at odds about how to handle this litigation. And then, of course, there is a murder. There has to be a murder.
No, really, there's a body in
There's
this
a
book.
body, there's a body. I can't help it. It's so interesting. I don't pay attention till, I wake up when there's a murder. And that sounds horrible, because my whole thing is honestly, you take it very, having said that joke about it, I think it really matters. And there's not a body count in these books. There's not, every single, in fact, a lot of this book is about the effects of one death. And anybody who's lived a little bit knows that, even if you're not the victim of violent crime or someone in your family isn't. But,
one of the things I've always really liked about Lisa's books are the plots, I think, are terrific. They're arresting and usually surprising and sometimes start off. What was the one where the woman was supposed to be dead and then she came back? I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a surprise.
Actually, we should say something, not to brag, but this is in the nature of thank you. After Anna became a #1 best-selling book in the country for the first time in my life, thanks to you. So thank you.
Last year.
Did you know
Right,
that?
Oh, it was April. That's right. I was thinking it was because last
Listen,
summer.
thank you. No, honest to God.
That book was fantastic.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. I really, well, you try to do something different every time. And, in that book, to just explain myself too, because people are like, why did you do it? That's a book where and I won't give anything away, but where half the story is the woman's point of view, and it goes in normal time frame. And the other half of the story is in the husband's point of view, and that goes backwards. You go, why do you do that? Because honestly, it almost killed me. I'm very bad at numbers. I couldn't even handle it. I couldn't plot it very well. It was hard to plot. But the reason I did that is in a conventional murder trial, as you know, the prosecution goes first. Yep. And I was like, well, if I told, which is the guys on trial, if I didn't flip it, you would get all the boring stuff up front, and I didn't want that. I wanted his story to be exactly juxtaposed with her story, so I had to flip it. And that's why I did that, just to explain my craziness.
So did you follow that time-honored thing of laying the timeline down on the floor in your hall and then walking up and down to see if you could figure?
I had to do that at one point.
Yeah, somebody was telling us about that. So maybe it was Jeffrey Deaver. No, couldn't have been. He's way too calm. Anyway, whatever, when they had a complicated story like that, what they ended up doing was, putting it on pieces of paper and then spreading it
See,
down
that's
the
what I
hall,
should
and
do.
then the other paper coming back, and then, they could walk along it and see how it all, sort of like the Bayeux Tapestry or something, see how it all fit together.
I know. I don't know why I don't do that. I was like, I kept it in my head. And even the book I'm working on now, for some reason I keep it in my head, like what time of day is it generally? You guys notice stuff like that. And the weird thing about my books is that sometimes it's like, it's 200 pages, but it's only the afternoon. Like, these people are having a really busy day. I used to worry about it. And then with apologies, you might think I'm crazy, but I was like, you know what, try not to worry about that, because a lot of times the cool thing about books is, like in this book, for example, somebody does something and it causes somebody else to do something. And that's what real life is like, I think it's very nice. They send you to this wonderful place, which is Scottsdale, and they get a driver, and I have a great driver, and he's driving me, and the guy in the left lane kind of starts to be an aggressive driver. And all you could see, and this is just what happens in the world. All the people around him start to react. And that's what happens when I write too. And for some reason, I can't slow it down. Like I read these books where it's like, and 10 years later, this is what happened. I'm like, holy shit. I can't even get to 2 o'clock. It's just the weirdest thing.
You like a compressed time frame.
Yeah, but there's a lot going on.
Really fast.
Yeah,
right.
and I was like, wow. But then I said, but this is realistic. You wouldn't let it wait. I like action, right?
You have to assume after you read one of her books that you're lying down for, arrest. And the characters actually get a little break, because they couldn't work at that intensity all the time.
Right,
They'd
right.
be exhausted, so it's like, all right, it's a critical case, and then, it's boring. And then it's
Right,
over.
like Mary
And
actually,
that's
this is the book I think where Mary goes to the, is this the one she has to go to the doctor? She goes to the gynecologist. Yes, this is a thriller where somebody goes to the OBGYN.
It's a unique genre. No one will really do that.
That's what happens when women write books. But I was like, that's what happened,
But I mean, a great deal of fantasy is boring. Yeah, it's just boring. And so, you have moments of crisis with long periods of preparation that is more or less boring. So, I mean,
You just cut out the boring part.
Yeah, exactly. You pick out the, exciting moments and.
Well, that was a challenge in After Anna, because you want to, as Judge Joel knows, every trial does have those lulls, but you don't want to read about the lulls. You're not here for the lulls. If I'm bored, we're really in trouble. And I was like, oh, we're not. I'll take that out.
So tell us, what is you're planning, because the word has reached me that you are thinking about writing an historical one too?
I am.
That's really exciting.
I am. Well, it's the same. I'm going to try to do all this stuff, so. But I have no personal life. I told you I'm celibate. I'm still celibate. And the good thing is I can write books. So I just, a long time ago, when I was in college, I grew up in a log cabin, and I took a course with Philip Roth. And it was a year-long course at the University of Pennsylvania. And it was very strange when you tell it in retrospect, because half of the year, you had to get selected. I was so excited I got to be in it. The first half of the year was called The Literature of Desire.
Ooh,
I know!
that's a fabulous title.
And it was all dirty books. Like, wait, would you sign up for that course? You're gonna read dirty books with Philip Roth. And you're a girl English major. There's 10 girls in the class. They're all girls. Everyone's all excited. Just to be in the same, I'm a book person, I'm excited. And he's so smart. When you read a book with someone like that, he basically taught us how to read books. Oddly enough, the second half of that year was called the course called Literature of the Holocaust. That's a real grim combination. But and there was no relationship. But that was where I got introduced to a lot of the literature of the Holocaust, primarily Primo Levi, who was an Italian Jew. And if you grew up like me in South Philly, you didn't even know that Italians came in Jewish. You were like, I thought we're all Catholic. Well, we're not. And I started to read about it, and ever since that happened, because to me, if you sort of take a second to permit me to analyze my own books over time, but like a book like Killer Smile is about how has justice changed in wartime, right? That's a book where Mary D'Annunzio is representing a guy who was interned during World War II. She's representing his estate. A lot of the books are about how does law and justice change in times of tension or war. And you can imagine it, because we're living it, right? We have fusses about civil liberties, TSA, right? All those, we tend to restrict our civil rights because we want to be alive. I don't ever bitch anybody out of TSA. I'm like, thank you for keeping me safe, and I get it. So, Primo Levi's an interesting case. What happened to Italian Jews during World War II? It just kind of has always been in my mind. And there's an episode, I don't want to give it away, but I said, no one knows about that, and someone needs to write about that. And it involves everything in a way. This is what happens when you turn 63. And you decide, what do I want to try to do in my life that I haven't done yet? And it would basically be dating Bradley Cooper, but he is not. So short of that, I was like, I want to write about that because thank you for reading me. You know that I'm always dealing with justice, law, Italianness, wartime, and really excellent food. This book's gonna have excellent food. And I said, this is something you could really and I want to do it in a trilogy, and I also want it to be a whole immigrant story because we are a nation of immigrants. My family came in, although funnily enough, and then I'll shut up, you get very, like if you think of The Godfather, he comes to America, Ellis Island. My daughter lives in New York. Whenever I see her, she lives in the west side of New York, and so we walk and I say, look, there's Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty, this is so great. Imagine these people, our family came over. Then I started to do the research. My family did not come in through Ellis Island. They had nothing to do with Ellis Island. They came in through Philadelphia. I'm like, wait, what? Like, there's none of this, there's no this. And they do this, like, we just pay $35. I have a brick at Ellis Island. I'm like, the Scottoline don't have anything to do with Ellis. Anyway, I was like, well, even that is a story. Did you even know that immigrants came in through any place else? Did you? I didn't. Am I just the dumbest person ever? I'm like, you know what? You need to tell that. Your family friggin' lived it, so you might anyway.
So that's
Are you sorry you asked
about? No, not at all. I've been curious since
it's driving me nuts.
Your new publisher and I had drinks in New York a couple of weeks ago,
yeah,
so strangely enough, your name came up. you know, I was fascinated with the idea if you're doing that, but I thought, knowing you, that it was gonna turn out to
I'm
be a
excited.
personal
And
kind of a story.
It's gonna be love. It's gonna be love and romance. Anybody here read Vendetta Defense? So Vendetta Defense is my little me dipping my toe in that water. And I liked writing this flashback, so so anyway, I hope you guys like it. I think it's important to try new things.
Absolutely.
You know, what can I tell you? I think I'll do a good job. I'm gonna really, really try.
Okay. You didn't have to sell us.
No, but you know, when people strike out, you're like, wait a minute. But that's not the only thing I'm doing. I'm gonna keep doing the things I'm doing too.
Right. So you're gonna write your spring books tend to be standalone books, right?
Right.
Where
Almost
everyone's in jeopardy. Everybody can die.
Right.
There's no safety for anyone in your. No, I
And
mean
somehow
really,
it's a suburb of Philadelphia. Yeah, I mean, this next one I'm writing now, I'm almost finished. It's called Someone Knows. Dun, dun, dun. And it's a little like After Anna. You know, there's the 2 viewpoints in After Anna. This one has 4. I know. I just like, you know what? Try to
Your
do.
hall wasn't wide enough for 4.
No, I need a bigger hall. God
No,
damn it.
wider hall. Etc. So that's the book you're coming back with in April.
Yep. And then we'll sort out the pub schedule for everything.
Sounds great.
Yeah, we're gonna do it all.
You want to take questions?
Sure, I love these guys.
All right. You're all.
Are you sick of me? I'm worried they're sick of me because wasn't I here in April?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you sick of me?
No.
That's why they
You guys
came
are
back.
super nice.
You're
Thank you.
asking the wrong audience.
Guys,
You should ask the people who aren't
Right.
here.
God, we're so friggin' sick of her. We're not going.
There you are.
Well, I'm glad. I'm never sick of you, so thank you for being here. Ask me anything. You know I love to talk. Yes, baby.
Well, you wrote another book that was historical fiction, I believe, where the Italians went to Missoula into
Right.
a compound there, and
Right.
I loved that book. And after I read it, my daughter was living in Missoula, and I said, "We have to go find this place." And so we drove, drove around it.
You saw it, right?
Yeah.
It's a little. Well, so the book is Killer Smile. And
what?
I went to Missoula. I saw that little museum,
Yeah.
such as it is.
Yeah.
Cost a quarter to get in.
I thought
You
that
can't
was
even get
such a
jump.
great story. There was so much in it, so much heart.
Well, I really appreciate that. I had to I got all the files. I subpoenaed from the government. It took me a year and a half to get all the files of every Italian who was interned, and there were many, many sent to Missoula. And but you know what? It's terrible to be interned against your will, but as I've said, there were Italians were in that camp, Germans were in that camp, and Japanese were in that camp. Now, the only ones we as a country were afraid of were Japanese. As Franklin Delano Roosevelt famously said, nobody's afraid of the Italians because you know that from every pizza box you ever got, where the guy on the front is like, that's tonight's a pizza. And that's what the Italians were like there. So what happened was the Italians who were in Missoula, and this is really true because I actually spoke with the first person I had. They were permitted to leave the camp and work in the sugar beet fields. And they would come home every night and let themselves back into the prison. We're so agreeable. And you could see their little bocce schedules. If you went in the back room, you could see the bocce schedule. And the bocce games, they had opera schedules. And what happened is after the 2 years of their internment was up and the war was over, they liked it so much they married women from Missoula. And so when you go to, and Missoula is completely typical in this regard. The internment camps, like there were 48 in all. They're far away. They're sent in the middle of nowhere because it's essentially a prison camp. But what happens is the Italians are, like I say, they're like the golden retriever of nationalities. They're like, I think we'll live here and get married. So there's a huge Italian community in Missoula, Montana.
Well, I'm really glad you explained that. 'Cause I
Isn't that
remember-
amazing?
Well, I haven't been to Missoula, but now when I go, you know about Missoula, don't you?
I grew up in Montana and I've never heard this story.
It's a true thing. Go see
I
it. You
even
saw
went
it then,
to
right?
Missoula for a little while.
It's a beautiful place. I couldn't believe it.
Do you know about our POW camp here in Scottsdale?
No.
We had a POW. How many of you know about the POW camp here? Okay.
During World War
So
II?
it was out here at Papago Park, and it was German. And you may or may not know that the Great Salt River flows through Phoenix. So they hatched a daring escape plan, and they built a boat, and they were going to float away on the Great Salt River, except the flaw was
I don't know, what's the
no
problem?
water.
What is it, just salt?
There are sometimes water in it. And once upon a time, before irrigation, all the rest there, actually, it was a flowing river. But as an escape plan to try to follow it down to the Sea of
Not a good
Cortez,
plan.
it was weak.
That kind of river.
But I honestly don't know. Do any of you know, did some of the Germans stay on here and intermarry in Phoenix, or did they all get repatriated? I've never even thought about that question. Does anyone know?
It's interesting because one of the other documents I found, so there were Italians, Germans, and Japanese in the same camp. So the Germans, you could actually saw letters. What happened is everybody fell into their stereotypes. So the Germans ended up being organizing the camp because the INS service
Keeping records.
they kept records and they ran everything, and then they also staffed the
Probably
kitchen.
kept the farm machinery going.
The machinery ran on time.
Right.
And I found a letter from the Germans who were writing to the head of the, I forget the name, I think it was INS, saying, we are dealing with persistent complaints from the Italians who think we use too much butter in the... This would be so Italian, that the only thing, like you're in a prison camp, but the thing you're pissed about is that the food's no good.
I often wonder how they actually had any kind of an Axis alliance during the war.
It's incredible.
You know, if you really think about it, how unlikely was it? Mussolini was a real aberration for them.
Well, I'm reading a whole lot about it. In fact, the book that you sold me, Under a Sheltering Sky.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, look, it's just not looked at much, and I thought, I want to look at that.
Anyone else have a question?
Yes, please. Yes.
I'm just curious, your books sell overseas, but are there certain countries where they're particularly popular, whether it's Italy or Canada or, just curious?
I do well in Australia. I don't know why that is. Australia is a very cool place, obviously, because they read me, but books are really expensive in Australia. And true in Canada as well.
Well, less so because they finally have started to publish in Australia. One of the reasons books were ferociously expensive in Australia was that their whole publishing industry was part of the UK, and so the books were all sent by ship from London, which dramatically increased the. When I first went to Australia, it was like $35 Australian for a paperback. It was like,
Yeah.
really? But now there's a huge wave of Australian writers.
They're wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've had several here at the store. We've been really fortunate.
I
But
bought their books here.
they're really developing, their own native. And also, if you watch Netflix or any of the TV series, there's a lot of really great Australian series on television.
Animal Kingdom, terrific.
The Heart Guy.
The Australian one.
And even a great New Zealand one. Have I told you about Broken Wood, which is possibly one of my very favorite? It's a police series set in New Zealand. It's absolutely fabulous.
I'll look for that.
Yeah, so, it's great to see that they're developing their own characters.
It's funny, because you have funny, weird, quirky stuff. So when you sell in another country, it's a different publisher, and so they get to do whatever cover. My covers always look vaguely pornographic. It's very funny. I'm like, okay. I'm selling, but my books are on fire. But in Italy, where I am published, they said, may we have permission to not use your name? We want to shorten your name to Lisa Scott. And I said, why? They're like, because Italians want to read books by Americans, and this is an Italian name. I'm like, really? But yeah, I am published as Lisa Scott there. The same thing happened to David Baldacci. And
Do they call him David Bald?
I will tell you, because he's a friend of mine. So the story he tells is that he got the same call. We want to make, what's your American name? Or as we grew up saying, Metagon, that's American. And he didn't know what to give himself a last name. He looked out the window and someone drove a Ford by, and he said, "How about David Ford?" And so he's published his name.
Wow, all the way back to names. So we're
Who, they get to say.
Actually, I never have run into that, a name, a pseudonym, so you don't sound ethnic.
Your publisher, do you ever use first two initials or something, to sort of?
Only if the author wanted to. That used to be a big deal. Let's say like J.H. Ants started writing police procedurals about Beaumont, Seattle cop, and went, I think, with J.A. to make it sound,
Yeah.
neutral,
Butch.
if not,
I know.
well, not Butch.
I wouldn't sound
No,
Butch.
never Butch. But,
No, I know. Butch
but
is
it
good.
could have been,
People like it.
could have been a guy. There's an
Yeah.
English woman currently writing, and she calls herself B.A. Harris. And I have no idea why. Because her books are in the whole women's, domestic suspense genre, so why she would go with B.A. as opposed
Well,
to.
J.D. Robb.
Yeah,
Right. And people,
as opposed to Nora Roberts,
Yeah.
who she actually is.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, I've
It's interesting.
always thought that our authors anyway, call themselves whatever they want. But I hadn't thought. I just love the Italian story. I've got this.
It's wild, isn't it? It's crazy.
Remember that, right? So,
What, other questions?
Come on, guys, you're not a very lively group.
No, they're here. God bless you, you're here. You don't have to do it. I'm the performer, not you. Go ahead.
No, I don't really have a question. I just want to go with the whole you here.
Do it. Fun. You feel very empowered.
Right. You feel very
you're like
empowered?
Oprah.
Got the microphone, honey, go for it.
You want to buy.
You want to go. You want
No, I just wanted to say you are probably one of the authors I really like coming to see because it's not.
Aw.
I mean, you talk about your books and everything, but you also give us the backgrounds on stuff that you're gonna do or how you came up with your ideas.
Thank you for that.
So it's just always very nice and entertaining.
So it's not a
Well,
long
the-
sales pitch, it's actually
I
interesting.
guess.
The goal is to be entertaining. Honestly, you don't need me to read to you. I don't understand why people do that, but they can. And look at me being all bitchy. You said a nice thing, and I turned it into anything. I'm better than the other ones because I'm more fun. But that's
This
my
is on
comfort level.
YouTube, it's gonna live there
Yeah,
forever.
great. I know. Sometimes I look at them when I was making ex-husband jokes. I'm like, that was great. So,
The
thank you.
truth is that on video, somebody reading with their head down, nothing is more boring. You just don't want to do that.
And the whole thing to me is, as corny as this sounds, books really connect people. Right? We're connected, and it's really, no joke, real connection, and it's soul to soul. And that's why, I like you. You knew I was going to be like this, even if we've never met, because you read me. You get the kind of idea. Like I give a book club party at my house, which you are all welcome to come for the April book. Anybody can come. You just get the April book, read it in your book club, send a picture of you holding it up. I've been doing it for 13 years. I have 1,000 people, 500 per day on my farm. It's awesome. And what always happens is the first question is somebody will go, listen, we are total strangers. Don't you think it's totally nuts to have complete strangers at your house? And at first they're like, we could kill you. I go, well, I don't think you're going to kill me. Like, it's a bunch of women. You're not going to kill me. And also, they go, isn't this it's kind of like an intrusion into your privacy? And I'm like, first off, I'm the least private person on the planet. Privacy is highly overrated, in my opinion. But also, if you read me, truly, you know my soul. That's a true thing. And so I don't really care if you know what my couch looks like. Like, that's not the privacy part. The privacy part's in the friggin' book. But, people fall in love. Things happen that I'm trying to really write about and make emotionally true. That's why books really connect people, because they're true. Look at me. This is what happens if I get this coffee before I come.
Next time it's gonna be wine.
So we have done mine. Oh my God, this is the only signing I've ever done where I was actually a little drunk. From the kidney party.
Right.
The kidney benefit.
I forgot about
Me,
that. Yeah, Linda.
Linda Fairstein, Kathy Reichs, Who was drunker? Drunkest.
Let's put it that way.
I know, listen, I act drunk normally, so when I'm drunk, it's like a nightmare.
Well, here's a question. Since you read Lisa's books, do you hear Lisa's voice when you're reading about her characters? Is that what it is? Because you've heard her, you know? One of the few
That's sad and
authors
scary.
that I always ask to read, although sadly he hasn't now been here for way too long, but when he used to tour, I always asked James Lee Burke to read a couple of paragraphs, because I think you had to hear his Louisiana voice to really read Robichaux. I mean,
I
it's just,
bet.
you know, to do that. But I think, you know, your voice is so distinctive.
My
Anybody
voice.
reading you would,
Yes, my
would just hear
Philadelphia
you.
accent is just so great. You're gonna have a headache if you don't already. That's what the books that I read with my daughter, which are the funny ones.
Right.
We record those audiobooks, as you may know. And in the beginning,
You do it together? I didn't
Yeah.
realize that.
We
I don't
totally
listen to
did.
audiobooks.
we have won awards. We won an Earphones Award for Best Audiobook read by an author. We
Wow.
beat Neil Gaiman. And his horrible Philadelphia accent has no business beating Neil Gaiman. But yeah, and they said, you know, we can hire somebody to read them. I'm like, this is me writing about my personal life, my mother, my daughter. No. And so now everybody gets a headache. But what I'm hoping for is the authenticity.
I love it.
You want that.
Anyone else have a question?
Yes.
So were you ever bringing Francesca with you?
Am I ever bringing Francesca? I know.
I tried. I asked.
I know. They didn't send us out here. We will do it. We will get her
Our
out
new
here.
publisher is more agreeable to my suggestions than her current publisher.
Well, I hope
I
that we will
put
get
that
her.
very delicately.
We
didn't I?
will, we will get her out here. And actually, she is working because she got, I might have mentioned this because I'm like a proud mom. She actually, she got a book deal. She is writing her first novel and she is going to get published by Random House. So baby girl is about to
That's very
get
exciting.
into the
The
business.
next generation.
I'm telling you, I'm ready to retire, girl.
You are
I'm gonna
not.
start smoking, I think.
You are not.
I look sophisticated. I'm only kidding, but I would never stop. I love what I do, and I feel lucky, very, very lucky.
As I said, what would you do? And the
Right.
answer is, yeah.
Oh, there's things to do, but I love this. I putter around. Don't you guys love to putter around your house? Garden, play with the ponies and the
Always
horse.
a limited time.
I know.
Yeah, no, I just love this job, and I love reading. I really love reading.
Yeah, no, you're excellent reader, Empire. Well, love that part, right? So is Linda Fairstein. So is Hank Philippi Ryan. You'd be surprised at the people who buy books. We're
Oh, more and more. You
sending
guys know
things
this,
out.
but this is really, it can come from me. It's really a props because, look, this is a society where if you don't like support it, it goes away.
Yes.
And this store has thrived because you have supported it. And that's why I really love you. I really, really appreciate it. I love to see, I get your newsletter and I see who's coming through here. And now all the publishers are like, Scottsdale, Scottsdale, Scottsdale. You made this a place on the map. And I remember when that, remember? mean,
I
you
remember
made that
when they
happen.
couldn't find it.
They still can't.
No, it was, I'm sure I told you, I probably told all of you, but I've always loved this particularly magic moment. I got a call from a publicist in New York one day, and she said, I wonder if, and I can't remember the author, I wonder if we could have so-and-so sign at your store on such and such a date. And I said, okay. I said, probably have to be 7:30. I said, well, it's a little late. Why? And she said, well, I booked her for afternoon in Texas, then Albuquerque for an early evening, and then we thought Phoenix at 7:30. And I said, I'm canceling. And she said, why? And I said, they're too far apart. And she said to me, and I mean this seriously, she said, but they're so close together on the map. And it took forever, I mean forever, to get people in New York to understand there was a real city here. It wasn't just a bunch of ranches with a crossroad, you know. They didn't understand, and I still have people who are coming here and they say, we can't find the airport in Scottsdale. And I say, try Phoenix. And they say, how far is it? I mean, seriously.
You have to say, it's right by the Salt River.
And you can take a boat. Like in Boston.
I'm gonna look for
You've never noticed it,
I
right?
never have.
No, it's because it rarely rains. Well, you had it last week. If you'd been here, you could have seen the great Salt River, some of which was running right through the storm. Yes, but that's the way it goes. In any case, I would like to thank our YouTube audience for joining us. It's been fun.
Yeah, you too.
And I would like to thank all of you. Is there anyone with a burning final question or comment?
Burning, that sounds big,
We
lady.
actually have time for
Is anyone burning?
a hand. Look at that.